CreepyCorner stories.
Hey everyone, welcome back to CreepyCorner stories. You know, diving into the dark web is always risky, but sharing these stories with you makes it worth it. I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Let me know in the comments below. I've noticed that these kinds of stories hit differently depending on where you are. It might even make the experience a little creepier. So, tell me, are you watching from the safety of your home or somewhere less secure? I found a photo on the dark web from my childhood, and I noticed something horrifying in the background. I don't mess with the dark web, or at least I didn't. I mean, I knew about it, obviously. Everyone's heard the horror stories. Black market organs, hitmen for hire, live stream torture rooms. The kind of stuff that sounds fake until you meet someone who's actually seen it. But for the most part, I figured the dark web was just overhyped. Some sketchy sites, maybe some illegal downloads, but nothing insane. Then last month, my friend Jason dragged me into this rabbit hole. He's one of those guys who's way too into hacking, crypto scams, and deep web mysteries. He swears he once saw a real red room, but I always figured he was full of it. Anyway, he was over at my place one night, drinking cheap beer, and he asked if I wanted to check out some weird sites with him. Just for fun, he said. I should have said no. We started off looking at pretty normal deep web stuff. Forums with names like the Silk Road 2.0 and Dead Drop Anonymous. A lot of them were dead links or required some kind of invite, which neither of us had. Then Jason found something called Elysium Archives. It was a plain black web page with a single tagline, preserving what should be forgotten. There were no categories, no search bar, just hundreds of image files, each with a random string of letters and numbers for a name. Some were grainy black and white crime scene photos. Others looked like old mugshots or surveillance stills. Creepy, sure, but nothing that crazy. Then I clicked on a random image, and my stomach dropped. It was a picture of me, like a full-on, unmistakable picture of me as a kid. I must have been around 7 years old, sitting at one of those plastic picnic tables at McDonald's. I recognized the place instantly. It was the McDonald's near my old house in Chicago, the one with the play place that reeked of sweaty socks and spilled Coke. My hair was a mess. I had a ketchup stain on my shirt, and I was holding up a half-eaten Happy Meal cheeseburger like it was a trophy. It was me. But that's not what made me slam my laptop shut. It was what was in the background. Behind me, standing just outside the play place tunnel, was a man in a black hoodie. His face was completely obscured by the shadow of his hood, but his posture was wrong. Too stiff, too still, like he wasn't just standing there, like he was watching. And then I noticed his hand. He was holding something small, something that, even in that grainy photo, I could tell was a knife. I sat there staring at my screen, feeling like my lungs had stopped working. I wanted to believe it was some kind of mistake. Maybe someone had scanned an old family photo and uploaded it for some bizarre reason. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized how impossible that was. I had never seen this picture before. My family wasn't the type to take random photos at McDonald's. And even if they had, how the hell would it have ended up on some disturbing dark web archive? And then there was him, the hooded man. He was standing just a few feet behind me, gripping something in his hand. Something thin, metallic, and sharp. Even though the image was grainy, I could make out a faint reflection along the blade's edge. A knife. A real one. Not a plastic Happy Meal toy. Not some random object I had misinterpreted. A knife. And he wasn't moving. He wasn't walking past or caught mid-step. He was waiting, watching. It felt like my childhood had just cracked open, revealing something rotten underneath. I tried to think. I tried to remember. This photo had to be from when I was around 7, which would have been 2003. I had no memory of anything bad happening to me at McDonald's back then. No kidnappings, no weird encounters, nothing. Just normal childhood stuff. So why was there a man with a knife standing behind me? And why didn't anyone else in the restaurant seem to notice? I clicked out of the image and scrolled back up, looking for some kind of source or explanation. There was nothing. No caption, no metadata, just a random string of letters and numbers for a file name. I copied it into Google, hoping I'd find something, but the only results were cryptic deep web forums with dead links. Jason leaned over, staring at the screen with a mix of excitement and unease. "Dude, what the hell?" he muttered. I didn't answer. My hands were shaking. Then Jason did something I wish he hadn't. He saved the image to my computer. "Why the fuck would you do that?" I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "In case we need to reverse image search it later," he said. "Maybe we can figure out where it came from." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My whole body felt wrong, like something inside me had been knocked loose. I just wanted to shut my laptop and pretend none of this had ever happened. But it didn't stop there, because the second Jason saved the file, something weird happened. The page refreshed, and when it reloaded, a new image had appeared. Another picture of me. The second photo. This one was different. It wasn't a childhood picture. It was recent. I was standing outside my apartment, holding a bag of groceries. The timestamp in the corner said it was taken 3 days ago, and in the background, half hidden behind a parked car, was the same man. Black hoodie, motionless, watching. This time, there was no knife in his hand, but there didn't need to be, because he was closer. Jason swore under his breath and grabbed his phone. "Dude, what the fuck is this? Is someone stalking you?" I didn't answer. My skin felt electric with fear, every hair on my body standing on end. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my camera roll, trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank, if maybe Jason had taken the picture himself. But there was nothing. No matching photo, no angle like that. Who took this? And how did it end up here? Then Jason noticed something. "Bro, your window." I turned, following his gaze. The blinds were shut, but there was a gap, a tiny sliver of open space, just big enough to see through. My stomach turned to ice. Had it been like that before? Or had someone moved it? I rushed to the window and yanked the blinds closed completely, then double-checked the lock. My heart was hammering so hard, it felt like my ribs would snap. Jason, still staring at the screen, muttered, "Check your door." I didn't want to, but I had to. I walked over, hesitated, then looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just the empty hallway of my apartment building. But that didn't make me feel any better. I locked the door anyway. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, my laptop made a noise. A notification, a message, from an anonymous sender. Jason and I both leaned forward. The message was short. Just 2 words. Nice picture. Then right before my eyes, the photo on the dark web page disappeared. Gone. Like it had never been there. Jason slammed my laptop shut. Fuck this, dude. We need to call someone. Call who? My voice felt weak. The cops? I hesitated. What the hell would I even say? Hey, I found a picture of myself on a shady website, and now I think someone's watching me. They'd laugh me off the phone. Jason must have seen the doubt on my face, because he grabbed my arm. Bro, this isn't normal. Someone took that picture of you 3 days ago. They're watching you. I swallowed hard. I knew he was right, but I also knew that whoever was behind this, they weren't done yet, and I had a feeling that the next photo would be the last. I barely slept that night. Every sound outside my apartment made my stomach clench. Every creak, every distant footstep in the hallway, every car passing by my window sent a jolt of fear through my spine. I kept picturing the man in the black hoodie, standing outside, watching, waiting. Jason crashed on my couch, his phone clutched in his hand like he was expecting something. Neither of us talked much after what happened. He had tried convincing me, begging me to call the police, but I couldn't, because I already knew what would happen. They'd ask if I had proof, and that was the problem. The picture had disappeared. It was gone from the website, gone from my browser history. Jason tried reopening the dark web link, but the site wouldn't load anymore. Just an error message. It was like it never existed, but I knew what I saw. And then there was the message. Nice picture. Who sent that? And how did they get my email? I checked my inbox 100 times, but the message had vanished. No trace of it. I even searched for it in my deleted folder. Nothing. The only proof we had left was the first photo, the one from my childhood. And the longer I stared at it, the worse I felt. I didn't remember that day. I didn't remember that McDonald's trip, that exact moment in time. But someone else did. Someone who had been there. And that meant something even worse. This wasn't random. This wasn't some hacker fucking with me for fun. Whoever took this picture, whoever uploaded it, had been watching me for years. I didn't know why. I didn't know how. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. The man in the hallway. It was around 3 a.m. when I heard it. A noise. Not from outside. Not from the street. From inside the building. A slow, steady creak, like someone walking barefoot down the hallway. Jason was already asleep on the couch, snoring quietly. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I waited, listening, hoping, praying that it was just my upstairs neighbor moving around. Then I heard it again, closer. The floor outside my apartment groaned under someone's weight. The sound of a slow, dragging footstep. Then another. Then another. Whoever it was, they weren't knocking. They weren't moving quickly. They were just standing there, waiting. My mouth went dry. I reached for my phone and turned on the camera. Slowly, I got out of bed, moving as quietly as I could toward the peephole. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to use both to hold the phone steady. I pressed my eye to the peephole, and I saw him, the man in the black hoodie, standing right outside my door. I felt like my body had turned to ice. My mind was screaming at me to move, to wake Jason up, to do something, but I couldn't. I just stood there, staring. His face was still hidden under the hood, but I could see his mouth. It was twisted into a grin, too wide, too unnatural, like he was enjoying this. Then, slowly, he lifted his hand. and pressed something against my door. A photo. Another one. He flattened it against the wood, holding it there for a few seconds before letting go. The paper fluttered to the floor. Then he stepped back into the shadows, and he was gone. The photo. I stood there, frozen, for what felt like forever. Then finally, I forced myself to move. I reached for the lock, my fingers trembling as I unlatched the door. I didn't want to open it, but I had to see. I cracked the door open just enough to reach out and grab the photo. My hands felt numb as I pulled it inside. I shut the door again, locked it, and took a deep breath before looking down. And the second I saw it, I felt my stomach drop. It was another childhood picture, but this one was worse. It was a photo of me, lying in bed, asleep, taken from inside my childhood bedroom. The truth, I don't remember how long I stood there, staring at the picture, my brain refusing to accept what I was seeing. This wasn't just someone stalking me now. This wasn't just a hacker messing with me. This was someone who had been inside my house when I was a kid. Someone who had stood over my bed, watching me sleep. And the worst part, there, in the corner of the photo, was a hand, holding a knife, not raised, not attacking, just hovering, like they were deciding, like they were waiting. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, my vision swam. I turned and shook Jason awake. Jason, wake the fuck up. He groggily opened his eyes. What? I shoved the picture into his hands. The second he saw it, his face drained of color. Dude! His voice was barely a whisper. Someone was in my house, I said. When I was a kid, someone was in my fucking room. Jason sat up, rubbing his face, trying to process what he was looking at. Okay, he said finally. Okay, we need to. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. I looked down. It was another email from the same anonymous sender. One single line. You were supposed to die that night. I dropped the phone. My whole body started shaking. Jason snatched it up, reading the message over and over. Then he turned to me. His face was pale. We need to go, he said. Right fucking now. Jason was already on his feet, throwing on his hoodie, shoving his phone into his pocket. Dude, we need to go, he said again, voice low, urgent. But I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at my phone, that email burning into my mind. You were supposed to die that night. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. Whoever this was, whoever had been following me, watching me, they weren't just some stalker. This wasn't just some game. This was unfinished business. And I had a horrible, sinking feeling that I had just made a very big mistake by finding that photo. Because now they knew I remembered. Jason grabbed my arm. Bro, come on. I forced myself to stand. My legs felt like jelly. My stomach was twisting itself into knots. I didn't know where we were going. I didn't care. I just needed to get the fuck out of there. The night drive. We left my apartment in such a hurry that I didn't even grab a jacket. The cold night air bit into my skin as we ran to Jason's car, parked down the street. Every shadow looked like a figure. Every sound made my pulse spike. Jason practically shoved me into the passenger seat and locked the doors behind us. He pulled out of the parking lot so fast the tires screeched. Where are we going? I finally asked, my voice barely steady. Anywhere but here. We sped down the highway, the city lights blurring past. Jason kept checking the rearview mirror every few seconds, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The silence felt heavy, suffocating. I couldn't stop thinking about the photo, about that hand holding the knife, about the fact that I had never known it was there. If I hadn't found that picture on the dark web, I would have gone my whole life never realizing that someone had once stood over my bed, deciding whether or not to kill me. And now they wanted to finish what they started. My hands were ice cold. I rubbed them together, trying to focus on the present. Jason, what if this isn't the first time they've tried? He glanced at me. What do you mean? I swallowed. What if they've been watching me this whole time? What if this isn't just about that night? Jason didn't answer, because he knew I was right. The forgotten memory. We ended up pulling into a gas station just outside the city, one of those old, half-abandoned places with a single flickering light over the pumps. Jason turned off the engine, but kept his hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. Okay, he said finally. Let's think. I nodded, rubbing my face. Okay. Who the fuck is this guy? Why would he be following you for like 20 years? I hesitated. I didn't have an answer, but there was something, a feeling, a memory, not a real one, more like a hole where a memory should be. I chewed my lip. Jason, do you remember when I was 9, when I went missing for a day? His head snapped toward me. What? I don't really remember it, I admitted. My parents told me I wandered off at a fair and got lost. They found me the next morning in some parking lot, completely fine. No bruises, no scratches, just sitting there. Jason stared at me. Dude, he said, voice barely above a whisper. That's not normal. I shrugged. I was a kid. Maybe I just... No, Jason cut in. Think about it. A kid goes missing for a whole fucking night, and nobody knows where he was, and you just... What? Appeared out of nowhere? I didn't answer, because now that I was actually thinking about it, that didn't make sense. How had I gotten there? Why didn't I remember? And why did my parents never talk about it? Jason leaned back, running his hands through his hair. Jesus Christ, man. I swallowed hard. My heart was pounding in my ears. What if that night, what if my disappearance, had something to do with the man in the hoodie? What if I had met him before? What if he had taken me? And what if he had let me go? The gas station security camera. Jason exhaled sharply. Okay, we're not safe out here. I nodded, but as soon as he said it, something changed. The air felt wrong. Still, like the world had stopped breathing. Jason went quiet, and then, at the exact same time, we both looked up. At the gas station security camera, a small dirty thing mounted just above the entrance. The red recording light was on, but the camera, it was pointed right at us. Not at the entrance, not at the pumps, directly at Jason's car. Jason went pale. That wasn't facing us when we pulled in. I didn't answer, because I could feel it now. The weight of eyes. Someone was watching us. Jason didn't waste time. He threw the car into reverse, practically slammed the gas pedal. The tires screeched against the pavement as we sped back onto the highway. We didn't stop, not for miles. The last email. We were halfway to Jason's parents' house when my phone buzzed. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see, but I had to. A new email from Anonymous. No subject, no attachments, just one single sentence. We remember you now. I felt my stomach drop. My vision swam. Jason saw my face and immediately swerved onto the shoulder, stopping the car. Dude. What? I handed him the phone. He read the message. Then his hand started shaking, because right as he read it, a new email came through. no text, just an image attachment. Jason opened it, and what we saw made my whole body go numb. It was a picture of us, sitting in Jason's car, right now. The timestamp said, March 8th, 3:47 a.m. I looked at the clock on the dashboard, 3:47 a.m., and in the background of the photo, behind Jason's car, just barely visible in the darkness, was a figure in a black hoodie, standing directly behind us. The moment Jason and I saw the photo, time seemed to stop. Neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. The image on the screen was impossible. It was us, right now, sitting in Jason's car on the side of the highway, lit only by the dim glow of the dashboard. But in the background, standing just behind the car, was a figure in a black hoodie, watching us. Jason's hands clenched around the phone so hard, I thought he was going to shatter the screen. His breathing was ragged, too fast, too shallow. Then, slowly, so slowly, he lifted his head and checked the rearview mirror. I followed his gaze, and that's when I felt something deep and primal snap inside me, because there was nothing there, just darkness, just empty road, no figure, no movement. But I knew with every cell in my body that someone had been there. And worse, they still were. Jason sucked in a sharp breath. His hands fumbled on the gear shift. His movements panicked, jerky. We're getting the fuck out of here. He slammed his foot on the gas. The car lurched forward. And that's when the headlights cut out. The highway vanishing act. Complete darkness swallowed us. 1 second, the road was there. The white lines flashing by. The empty stretch of highway ahead. And then, nothing. It was like someone had flipped a switch. Like the entire world had been unplugged. No streetlights. No stars. Not even the faint glow of the dashboard. Just black. Jason swore. What the fuck? What the fuck? He twisted the key in the ignition. The engine was still running, but the car wasn't moving anymore. The road was just gone. I couldn't even see my own hands in front of me. I reached for my phone, shaking, my fingers slipping as I unlocked it. The screen cast a weak, bluish glow in the car. It didn't illuminate anything outside, just endless, suffocating nothingness. Jason's breath was coming fast, panicked. He pressed his hand against the horn. Nothing. He flipped the high beams. Nothing. I grabbed his arm. Drive. Just fucking drive. I can't see, Jason shouted. His voice cracked, raw and terrified. Just go. Jason gritted his teeth, slammed the gas pedal. The car didn't move. Then we felt it. The first knock. A dull, heavy thump against the back of the car. Then another. And another. Like footsteps. Jason's entire body went stiff. I turned, but there was nothing behind us. Just black. Endless black. Another knock. This time, closer. Then breathing. Slow. Deep. Right outside my window. I didn't want to look. Every single instinct in my body told me not to look. But I did. And I saw him. The face in the dark. The man in the black hoodie. But this time, I could see his face. Or what was left of it. His skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched too tight over his skull. His mouth, God, his mouth, was too wide. His lips cracked, stitched together in places like someone had tried to sew him shut and failed. But it was his eyes that made my stomach turn to ice. They were black, not just dark, black, like pits, like there was nothing behind them but a deep, bottomless void. I tried to scream, but then he opened his mouth, the sound that shouldn't exist. The stitches on his lips tore open, pieces of skin ripped apart, strands of something wet stretching and snapping. And then he spoke, but it wasn't a voice. It was a sound, a low, grinding, wet noise, like something being crushed underfoot, a gurgle, a choke, a whisper that wasn't made by a human throat. Jason slammed his hand into the gear shift. Fuck this! He floored the gas pedal. The car moved. It lurched forward like it had been released from something, like something had been holding it back. And just like that, the headlights flickered back on. The road was there again. Streetlights, highway signs, the city in the distance. Like we had never left. Like it had never happened. But I knew it had. Because Jason and I, we weren't the same anymore. The final email. Neither of us spoke for the rest of the drive. We didn't go to Jason's parents' house. We didn't go anywhere. We just drove. Drove until the sun started to rise. Drove until my eyes burned from exhaustion and Jason's hands were shaking on the wheel. Then my phone buzzed. I didn't want to look. I really didn't want to look. But I did. One last email. From Anonymous. No subject, no image. Just 5 words. We know where you are. And that's when I finally understood. They had let me go. All those years ago. For reasons I'll never know. They had spared me that night. But by finding that picture, by remembering them, I had woken them up. And now they weren't going to stop. Because I was never supposed to leave that night. And they were going to make sure it never happened again. Some things should stay forgotten. But I had remembered. And now, they were coming back for me. To finish what they started. I should have died 2 years ago. I have a dark web murderer to thank for my life. Alright, so I don't know how to start this without sounding completely insane, but I swear every single thing I'm about to say is real. I'm not here to make up some horror story for karma or clicks. I just need to get this off my chest. 2 years ago, I was supposed to die. And the only reason I'm still breathing is because a literal murderer on the dark web decided to spare me. Or maybe something even worse happened. I'll explain. So back in 2023, I was just your average broke college student, living off energy drinks, McDonald's dollar menu items, and the occasional regretful late-night DoorDash order. I was rooming with my best friend Zach in this run-down apartment right outside Chicago. The place was honestly a dump. Our sink barely worked. The walls were thin as hell, and I'm pretty sure something was living in the walls. But it was cheap, and we were both too deep in student debt to care. Now, Zach was the kind of guy who loved messing with the internet's weirder corners. He was always on Reddit deep diving into conspiracy theories, watching those creepy AI-generated TikToks, or finding sketchy sites just for the thrill of it. One night, he got the dumbest idea he's ever had. Dude, let's see if we can get on the dark web. I laughed at first. Yeah, no thanks. I actually enjoy not having the FBI kick down our door. But Zach was already pulling out his laptop, grinning like an idiot. Nah, man, that's just the movies. It's not illegal to look at stuff. We'll just browse around. No clicking links, no buying anything, just exploring. At this point, I should have said no. I should have told him to screw off, thrown on a movie, and ignored him. But I was bored, and honestly, I wanted to prove him wrong. Prove that the dark web was just a bunch of overhyped nonsense. So we got Tor, booted it up, and within minutes, we were looking at the kind of websites that made my stomach turn. There were forums selling stolen identities, people offering services that I don't even want to type out, and way too many posts talking about human trafficking like it was just another business. But then, Zach found something that made my blood run cold. A site called Red Room Roulette. The page was simple, just a black background with a single red button in the center that said join the game. No descriptions, no rules, just that. Now, if you know anything about dark web horror stories, you've probably heard about red rooms. If you haven't, well, it's basically the idea that somewhere out there, rich psychos are paying to watch people get tortured or killed on livestream. I always thought it was an urban legend, just another internet boogeyman, but something about this site felt wrong. Zach, being the absolute dumbass he is, clicked the button before I could stop him. The screen went black for a few seconds. Then a message popped up. Welcome, player 412. The game begins now. Before I could even react, the webcam light on Zach's laptop turned on. That's when I felt true, primal fear. Dude, shut it off, I yelled, scrambling to close the browser. Zach was frozen, just staring at the screen. Then the chat box opened, and a message appeared. Would you like to play? Another message followed almost immediately. Say yes to continue. Say no to forfeit. My hands were shaking. I slammed the laptop shut, practically throwing it across the couch. Dude, that's not funny. What the hell was that? Zach was pale. I don't know. I didn't type anything. I didn't even put my camera on. That's when my phone buzzed. I looked down at the screen, and my heart nearly stopped. It was a text from an unknown number. You shouldn't have joined. At that exact moment, someone knocked on our door. It wasn't a friendly knock. It was slow, rhythmic, like whoever was outside wanted us to know they weren't in a hurry. Zach and I just stared at each other, completely silent. Another knock. Then another. I grabbed a kitchen knife. Zach grabbed a baseball bat. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly powerless. Whoever was on the other side wasn't saying a word. They just kept knocking. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence. We didn't move for what felt like hours. Eventually, Zach worked up the courage to check the peephole. I saw him freeze. His breathing got shallow. What is it? I whispered. He didn't answer. He just turned to me, his face drained of color. There's no one there. And that should have been the end of it. Just some dark web prank, right? Some creep trying to scare us. But that was just the beginning. Because when I woke up the next morning, I had a new text. The game has started. And from that moment on, my life became a living nightmare. I didn't tell Zach about the text. Not right away. I wanted to pretend it wasn't real. That maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me. That it was just some random scam bot sending a vague message. But deep down, I knew. I knew it was real. Because that entire day, I felt like I was being watched. I don't mean in the paranoid, oh, someone might be looking at me kind of way. I mean physically felt it. This suffocating pressure at the back of my neck. This overwhelming sensation that if I turned around too fast, I'd see someone standing just over my shoulder. It got to the point where I started checking every room before walking in, looking behind the shower curtain, making sure the front door was locked again and again. Zach acted normal, too normal, like he had already brushed off everything that happened the night before. He even went to class like nothing was wrong, like he hadn't invited something horribly wrong into our lives with the click of a button. I stayed in. I tried to focus on anything else. YouTube, Twitter, even doom scrolling through TikTok, just to distract myself. But then, around noon, another text came in. "Are you enjoying the game?" I swear, I felt my stomach twist into a knot. I didn't respond. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the message, hands shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. And then, another text. "Check your door." I jumped up so fast that I knocked over my drink, spilling it all over my desk. My heartbeat was pounding in my ears, but my body moved before my brain could catch up. I crept towards the front door, every step feeling heavier, my pulse hammering inside my skull. And then, I saw it. Something was slid under our door. A single piece of folded paper, the edges slightly crumpled, like it had been clutched too tightly in someone's hand. I bent down slowly, carefully picking it up, terrified of what I was about to see. I unfolded it, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a picture of me, sleeping. The timestamp in the corner said 3:14 a.m. My entire body locked up. My skin went cold, because that meant someone had been in our apartment, in my room, watching me, and I had no idea. I stumbled backward, the paper still clutched in my shaking hands. My mind was screaming at me to call the police, but a deeper, darker part of me knew it wouldn't matter. Whoever, whatever, was doing this wasn't some ordinary stalker. This was part of the game. My phone buzzed again. "Do you want to quit?" I should have said yes. I should have texted back, begged, thrown my phone out the damn window, anything. But instead, I did nothing. My fingers were frozen. My breath came in short, ragged bursts. And then, the next text came in. Too late. That's when I heard my closet door creak open. I don't remember making the decision to move, but suddenly, I was running, sprinting out of the apartment, barely stopping to grab my keys, my lungs burning as I bolted down the stairwell and into the street. The Chicago air hit me like a slap, but I barely noticed. I just kept running. I didn't stop until I was standing in the middle of a crowded Starbucks, surrounded by confused strangers, staring at the sweaty, panicked guy who had just burst in like a lunatic. I called Zach, straight to voicemail. I called again, and again. No answer. I knew I had to go back. I waited in that Starbucks for 3 hours, just sitting there, staring at my phone, trying to convince myself that when I went back, everything would be normal, that I had imagined it, that I was losing my mind. But when I finally stepped back into our apartment, I knew instantly that something was wrong. The air was off, heavy, stale. And then I saw Zach's laptop. It was open, sitting on the coffee table. The screen was black, except for a single message flashing in the chat box. Player 412 has been eliminated, and right below it, a live feed. My stomach dropped. It was a video stream. Zach was in it. He was tied to a chair, his mouth duct taped, his eyes wild with fear. The room was dark, but I could make out shapes in the background, plastic sheets covering the floor, a single swinging light bulb overhead, like something out of a horror movie. I scrambled to grab the laptop, my fingers slamming against the keyboard. "Zach!" I screamed. "What the fuck?" Then the camera zoomed in. Someone stepped into frame. They were wearing a mask, not some cheap Halloween store mask. This thing was wrong. Handmade, twisted. It looked like someone had taken pieces of raw, wet leather and stitched them together, with two hollow, soulless holes where the eyes should be. They lifted a knife, and then the screen went black. I don't remember screaming, but my throat felt raw afterward. my vision blurred with panic, my hands shaking so hard that I nearly dropped the laptop. I tried refreshing the page, reopening the browser. Nothing. Zach was gone. I called the police. They didn't take me seriously. They sent an officer to the apartment, but by the time he arrived, Zach's laptop was gone. His room was empty. No signs of struggle, no blood, no proof that anything had happened at all. And then, Zach's parents got a text from his number. "Hey guys, decided to drop out. Gonna go travel for a bit. Don't worry about me." Just like that, he was erased, like he never existed. The police ruled it as a voluntary disappearance. Case closed. But I know the truth. Zach didn't run away. He lost the game, and I was still playing. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Zach's face, his wide, panicked eyes staring into the camera, silently begging for help. The twisted leather mask, the knife, the way the screen went black before I could see what happened next. But deep down, I already knew. Zach was dead, or worse, he was erased. No one believed me. The police brushed it off as him dropping out. His parents actually seemed relieved, like maybe this was just him getting his life together. But I knew Zach. He wouldn't just leave. He wouldn't just disappear without telling me. The game took him. And the worst part? I was still playing. I learned that the hard way. The stranger at McDonald's. 3 nights after Zach vanished, I hit my breaking point. I couldn't sit in my apartment anymore. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like someone watching me. I just needed to be around people. Somewhere bright, somewhere loud, somewhere I could convince myself I was still safe. So I went to McDonald's. It was late, maybe 2 a.m. The place was nearly empty. Just a couple of tired employees and a homeless guy nursing a coffee in the corner. I ordered something I didn't even want, just to have an excuse to sit there. But then, he walked in. At first, I didn't think much of him, just some random dude in a hoodie. But then he sat down at my table, not across from me, next to me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body. "Can I help you?" My voice came out shaky, barely above a whisper. The guy didn't answer. He just pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then slid it across the table toward me. I looked down. It was a live stream. A familiar dark room. Plastic sheets covering the floor. A single, swinging light bulb. My throat closed up. My skin went cold. The man finally spoke. His voice was soft, almost polite. "Do you know what happens when you try to quit?" I swallowed hard. My hands were shaking. On the screen, the camera panned over. There was someone new in the chair. Not Zach. Mister, I froze. My stomach twisted into knots as I stared at the image. It was me, tied to a chair, duct tape over my mouth, head slumped forward like I was unconscious. The same room, the same setup, like my fate had already been decided. "This is a joke," I whispered. My voice cracked. "Right? Right?" The man didn't answer. He just took his phone back, stood up, and walked out of the McDonald's without another word. I sat there, staring at my untouched food, my mind spiraling, because that meant one of 2 things. Either they had already taken me, and I was living on borrowed time, or I was next. The hunt begins. That night, I packed a bag and left. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay in that apartment. I didn't even go back for my laptop. I didn't want anything that might connect me to the game. I turned off my phone, used cash for everything, bounced between hotels and random Airbnbs, just to stay off the grid. But it didn't matter. They still found me. The first sign was small. A hotel key card slid under my door for a room I wasn't staying in. Then, a piece of duct tape on my bathroom mirror, the same kind that had been over Zach's mouth. Then, my own face appearing on missing person posters in cities I hadn't even been to yet. Everywhere I went, they were one step ahead. And then, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I tried to fight back. The warehouse. It happened in Detroit. I'd been crashing in cheap motels, never staying in one place for more than a night. But no matter where I went, I felt them watching. I started noticing the same people, blank faces in the crowds, lingering just a little too long, never making eye contact, but always there. So I decided to set a trap. There was an abandoned warehouse near the motel I was staying at. One of those rusted out husks of a building, covered in graffiti, a place no one would go unless they had a death wish. I left my motel key card in the alley behind it, then waited inside, hiding behind a stack of rotting wooden pallets. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 3:14 a.m., the same time my picture had been taken, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. Then the door creaked open. A figure stepped inside, tall, dressed in black, and wearing that same twisted leather mask. I didn't think. I just moved. I rushed forward, swinging the metal pipe I had found earlier. It connected with their ribs, a sickening crack echoing through the warehouse. They stumbled back, but they didn't fall. They just turned their head toward me, like they weren't even hurt, like they weren't even human. That's when I heard the others. More footsteps, more masked figures, emerging from the darkness like shadows peeling away from the walls. 5, 10, 15 of them, all standing still, watching. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't think. I just sprinted out of the warehouse, into the streets, my legs burning, my heart pounding, and for the first time, I truly understood. This wasn't a game. This was a hunt, and I was the prey, the message that was a week ago. I don't know how much longer I can keep running. Everywhere I go, they're waiting. I haven't used my real name, my credit cards, my phone, but they still find me. And tonight, I got another text. My first in days. Ready to play again. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. But I do know one thing. I should have died 2 years ago. And now, they're coming to collect. I haven't stopped running. I don't know what city I'm in anymore. I don't even know what day it is. The game has stripped that away from me. Sleep is a luxury I can't afford, because every time I close my eyes, they get closer. And tonight, I think they've finally caught up. The body in the bathtub. It started this morning. I'd been crashing in a rundown motel just outside of Philadelphia. One of those places where the neon sign flickers and the front desk guy barely looks at you when you pay in cash. I had picked it because it was anonymous, forgettable, a place no one would bother looking. I was wrong. I should have known something was off the second I woke up. The air was thick, too thick, like a room itself was holding its breath. My skin felt clammy, my body heavy, like I was swimming through something invisible. And then I heard it. Drip. A slow, steady drop of water. Drip. Coming from the bathroom. I sat up, my pulse already hammering in my ears. The faucet hadn't been leaking last night. I knew that for a fact. I had checked the whole room before locking myself in, paranoid as always. But now, drip, drip, drip. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to know. But I had to. I crept toward the bathroom, my bare feet silent against the stained carpet. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might give me away. The closer I got, the stronger the feeling became. That feeling of being watched. I reached for the door handle, turned it, and inside, a body, limp, motionless, floating face down in the bathtub, the water stained a sickly, swirling red. I stumbled back, my stomach twisting into a tight, burning knot. My brain refused to process what I was seeing, refused to accept it as real. But the smell, coppery and raw, like wet pennies and sweat, told me otherwise. Then I saw the mask. It was floating beside the body, half submerged in the water. That same twisted leather mask, stitched together from something that looked disturbingly like skin. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And then the body shifted, just slightly, like it was about to turn over. I didn't wait. I ran. I grabbed my bag, threw open the motel door, and sprinted into the early morning haze, my mind screaming at me to go faster, to get away, to get as far as possible before they could find me. The list, I made it 3 blocks before I dared to stop. My lungs burned, my vision swam, but I forced myself to keep moving, ducking into an alley, pressing my back against the damp brick wall, sucking in deep, ragged breaths. I needed to think. That body, it wasn't just a warning, it was something more, a message, and I had to know what it meant. Against my better judgment, I pulled out my phone. I'd kept it off for days, but something told me, no, I knew, there would be something waiting for me. I was right. A single email, no sender, no subject, just an attachment. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. Every nerve in my body screamed at me not to open it, to throw my phone into the nearest sewer and disappear. But I needed to know, so I clicked it. A document opened. A list. Zachary Klein. Eliminated Melissa Grayson. Eliminated Daniel Rains. Eliminated Jennifer Hall. Eliminated Marcus Vale. Eliminated the names kept going. Dozens of them. Some scratched out, some still intact. But my eyes were drawn to the last name on the list. Nathan Carter. Active player. My name. A chill shot through me, sinking deep into my bones. My stomach dropped, because below my name, there was one more. A name I recognized. Hannah Klein. Next target. My blood turned to ice. Hannah, Zach's little sister. The trap. I didn't hesitate. I booked it to the nearest bus station, buying a ticket with the last of my cash. I didn't care how dangerous it was. I didn't care that they were watching. I had to warn her. By the time I got to Indianapolis, the sun had already set. Hannah lived just outside the city, in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind with neatly trimmed lawns and porches that felt too safe, too far removed from the horror I was bringing with me. I banged on her door. Nothing. I banged again, harder this time. Hannah, open the door. It's me. Still nothing. Dread curled in my gut. I stepped back, looking up at her windows. All the lights were off. She should have been home. I reached for my phone, my fingers fumbling to call her number. It rang once, twice. Then, click. A voice answered, but it wasn't Hannah. You're too late, Nathan. A deep, distorted whisper. Then, the line went dead. The front door creaked open, just an inch. A sliver of darkness yawning into the quiet night. I should have run, but I stepped inside. The house of no return. The second I crossed the threshold, I knew I had made a mistake. The air was thick with the scent of something rotten. The living room was eerily pristine, too pristine. like it had been staged, like everything was in its perfect place, except for the fact that no one lived there anymore. And then I saw the pictures. Framed family photos lined the walls, except Hannah's face was gone, scratched out, every single picture, like she had never existed, like she had already been erased. A noise came from upstairs, a slow, rhythmic thud, thud, thud. I swallowed hard, forcing my feet to move. Every step up the staircase felt like walking toward my own grave. The hallway was dark. The only light came from Hannah's bedroom. Her door was slightly ajar, a pale glow spilling out onto the floorboards. I pushed it open, and my heart stopped. Hannah was there, but she wasn't Hannah anymore. She was sitting in the chair, the same kind Zach had been tied to. Her head slumped forward, her hair hanging in front of her face. The dim light flickered, casting sickly shadows across the plastic-wrapped walls. A figure stood beside her, tall, silent, wearing the mask, that awful, stitched-together mask. My vision blurred, my breathing turned ragged, my whole body screamed at me to move, to grab her, to fight, but I couldn't, because then she lifted her head and smiled. "Welcome back to the game, Nathan." The door slammed shut, the lights went out, and I knew I had just walked into my own execution. The lights went out. Everything turned to darkness so thick, so absolute, it swallowed the room whole. And then the whispers began, not from one voice, many, layered over each other, overlapping, coming from the walls, the ceiling, inside my own head. "You shouldn't have come back. It's your turn now. Run, little rabbit, run." A sharp, electric panic shot through me, snapping my body into motion. I stumbled backward, my hands searching for the door, for anything, but there was nothing. The door was gone. The room was shifting, changing. The soft glow that had lit the space just moments ago was gone, replaced by something dimmer, red, pulsing, like a heartbeat. And then I heard it, the first click, 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 metal against metal coming from the walls, the ceiling, like knives tapping against glass. Something was in here with me, something waiting. I turned, and Hannah was gone. The chair was empty. The restraints dangled loosely over the sides, swaying slightly, like she had just slipped out of them. I wasn't alone anymore. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. My fingers fumbled in the dark, searching for anything, something to defend myself with, some way out, some kind of logic to this nightmare. Then, movement. A figure stepped forward from the darkness, not walking, gliding, and I saw it, not just one, dozens, figures, standing just outside the edges of my vision, silent, still, their faces obscured by the light, or maybe they didn't have faces at all. Then, click, the mask. It was right in front of me, a hollow, stitched-together thing, barely resembling a human face. Leather straps looped around the back, pulled too tight, pressing deep into pale, clammy skin. But this time, there was something worse, something I hadn't seen before. A camera, a small blinking red light embedded in the forehead of the mask, watching me, recording me. I opened my mouth to scream. The hands grabbed me, cold, rough, too many of them, pulling me backward, dragging me down, down, down. The room with no exit. When I woke up, I was somewhere else. A basement, maybe a warehouse. I was tied to a chair. Plastic sheets covered the walls, just like before. Just like with Zach. Just like with Hannah. And standing in front of me, the collector. That's what I had started calling him in my head. The one who never spoke. The one who always watched. the one who wore the mask. He stood there, silent, his head tilted slightly, like he was studying me. His presence was wrong. The air felt heavier when he was near, like the gravity in the room was bending around him. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. My phone. He held it up, then tapped the screen. A video started playing, and my blood turned to ice. It was me, sitting in the chair, mouth duct taped, head slumped forward, the same way Zach had been, the same way they had shown me before, except this time, it was happening in real time. I was watching my own execution before it even happened. "What do you want?" I rasped, my voice barely above a whisper. The collector didn't answer. Instead, the whispers started again. Not from him, from the walls, from the cameras. They were watching. They had always been watching. And then I saw the list. A massive, tattered parchment pinned to the wall behind him. Names, hundreds, thousands. Some were crossed out. Some were still waiting. I knew, before I even saw it, my name was there. But I wasn't at the bottom anymore. I was at the top. And below me, a new name. Someone else. Someone next. I barely had time to process it before he moved. A flash of silver. The knife. It sliced through the duct tape on my wrists. Not my skin. Not my throat. The restraints. He was letting me go. I didn't understand. My brain was still lagging behind, still trapped in the spiral of terror, waiting for the inevitable cut, the pain, the blood. But he just stepped back, and the whispers grew louder. A new player had entered the game, and I had survived. For now, I didn't ask questions. I didn't stop to think. I ran. I tore through the basement, up the stairs, down the hallway. The walls were shifting, melting, becoming something else as I moved, but I didn't care. I reached the door. I threw myself outside, and I was back in the real world, the cost of survival. That was a year ago. I don't know why they let me go. Maybe I had played my part. Maybe I had become one of them. Or maybe I was never supposed to survive at all. Maybe I wasn't me anymore. But I know one thing. The game never ends. Not really. Because last night, I got a text from an unknown number. Player 413 has entered the game, and attached a picture, a new name on the list, a new target, and the worst part, it was someone I knew. I should have died 2 years ago, and now I'm the one choosing who dies next. I downloaded an app from the dark web that lets you see people's auras. My son's aura is different from everyone's else, and it might end the human race. I don't know how to explain this in a way that makes sense, but I need you to listen. Really listen. Because if I'm right, if what I saw is real, then none of us are safe. Not you, not your family, not the people you pass on the street. The world you think you know. It's a lie. And I only found out because I made the worst mistake of my life. It started with a conversation I wasn't even supposed to hear. I was at this shitty 24-hour diner near my office. One of those places with sticky booths and a waitress who looks like she's been dead inside for years. I wasn't even hungry. I just needed somewhere to sit and kill time before heading home. That's when I heard them. 2 guys sitting in the booth behind me, whispering in these low, urgent voices. At first, I wasn't paying attention, but then one of them said something that made my skin crawl. "They don't look like us. That's how you know." His voice was shaking. "They have shadows where their skin should be." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The other guy, the one with the deep voice, just laughed. That's why you don't stare too long. I shifted in my seat, trying to hear more, but just as I did, the deep-voiced guy got up. He walked past my table, heading toward the bathroom. That's when I saw it. His reflection in the diner window. It didn't move right. I can't explain it. It wasn't delayed. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was just wrong. Like his reflection was trying to mimic him, but kept getting little details slightly off. My stomach turned. Then he was gone. I sat there, heart hammering, watching as his friend just sat in the booth, staring down at the table, hands clenched into fists. I should have left it alone. I should have paid my bill, walked out, and never thought about it again. But I didn't. I waited until the guy with the deep voice came back, sat down, and started talking again. That's when I took my phone out, turned on the voice recorder, and hit record. Most of it was nonsense. Something about a hidden layer of reality. Something about how most people will never see it. But then they started talking about an app. It lets you see them, the whispering guy said. They're real forms. Bullshit. I'm serious. Someone posted the link on a forum. You use your phone camera and you can see them. My fingers clenched around my phone. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to ask what the hell they were talking about. But some deep animal part of my brain was screaming at me to stay quiet. Then the whispering guy said something that made my blood turn to ice. I tried it on my wife. A pause. She's not my wife. I stopped breathing. She looks like her. She talks like her. But the app showed me what's underneath. And a sound. Wet. Choking. Like he was trying not to throw up. There was nothing inside. Just a mouth. A mouth that kept smiling. I grabbed my phone, turned off the recorder, and stood up so fast my chair nearly fell over. I threw some cash on the table and walked out of that diner without looking back. I should have let it go. But that night, lying in bed next to my wife, staring up at the ceiling in the dark, I couldn't stop thinking about it. What if it was a joke? Some weird internet prank? But then why did that guy sound so fucking scared? I pulled out my phone, opened up a private browser, and started searching. It took me hours. The link wasn't easy to find. It wasn't on any normal site. I had to dig through forums, encrypted chat rooms, and pages that looked like they hadn't been updated since the 90s. But eventually, I found it. A single black web page with white text. See the world as it truly is. Just like the guy in the diner said. There was no description, no information, just a single download button. I hesitated. My eyes flicked over to my wife, sleeping peacefully beside me. Then I pressed it. The app installed instantly. No permissions, no setup, just a black icon labeled Aura View on my home screen. I stared at it. I should delete this. That was my last rational thought before I tapped the icon. My phone camera opened, but the screen flickered, just for a second, like static on an old TV. Then I saw it. Everything looked the same, except for a faint glow surrounding objects and people, like a heat map, but with colors. I pointed it at my wife. Her aura was a soft, golden yellow. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Okay, nothing weird. I turned the camera toward myself, using the front-facing lens. My own aura was blue. I exhaled, laughing a little. Maybe this was just some dumb filter app after all. Then I heard the baby monitor crackle. A soft, shuffling sound from my son's room. Noah. I swallowed. Just to be safe. Just to put my paranoia to rest. I switched the camera to the hallway and slowly walked to his room. My heart pounded as I turned the knob, pushed the door open, and raised my phone. And then I saw it. The thing standing over my son's crib. It looked like my son. Same curly hair. Same tiny hands gripping the crib bars. But the aura, there was no aura. Just black tendrils, slithering and twisting around his body, reaching up to the ceiling, curling down his back like spider legs. I gasped, and the thing in the crib turned its head. Not fast, slow, like it already knew I was there. And then it did something I will never forget for as long as I live. It smiled. Not like a baby. Not like my son. Its mouth stretched too wide, its lips curling all the way up to its temples. Its teeth were too sharp. Too many. It smiled. And then, in my son's voice, it whispered, "Daddy, why are you awake?" I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there in the dark, my phone trembling in my hand, staring at the thing that looked like my son. The app was still open. The black tendrils that surrounded him slithered and pulsed, twisting in slow, deliberate movements, like they were breathing. And that smile, that unnatural, stretched too wide, teeth too sharp smile. "Daddy, why are you awake?" My brain refused to process what I was seeing. The voice was Noah's, software sleepy. But the way the words came out, it was wrong. Like something was trying to mimic human speech, but didn't quite understand how. I wanted to respond, to tell him I was just checking on him, but my throat had sealed shut. I did the only thing I could think of. I blinked, hard, when I opened my eyes again. He was just a baby. No tendrils, no smile. Just my son, sitting up in his crib, rubbing his tired little eyes with his tiny fists. Like nothing had happened. Like I had imagined it all. But I knew better. I knew what I had seen. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might throw up. My hands were shaking as I slowly lowered my phone, turning the screen away so I wouldn't have to see that thing through the app again. I forced my voice to stay calm. "Hey, buddy, I was just checking on you." He blinked up at me, his little head tilting. And then, "Daddy, why are you awake?" The exact same words, the same tone, like a fucking replay. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. Noah never repeated himself like that. If he was confused, he'd ask a different question, or whine, or reach for me. But this was the exact same sentence, like a recording. I backed out of the room without another word. Noah just stared, and that smile was creeping back onto his tiny face. I shut the door, locked it, and then I ran. I barely made it to the bathroom before I collapsed against the sink, gripping the edges so hard my knuckles went white. My reflection stared back at me, wide-eyed and pale. What the fuck had I just seen? My mind was scrambling for an explanation. Maybe I was exhausted. Maybe the app was some kind of sick prank. Maybe I was just losing it. But the feeling in my gut told me otherwise. That wasn't my son. Not really. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands, exiting out of the app, half expecting to see something still lurking in the camera feed. But my home screen was normal. I hesitated. Then I pulled up my call log and tapped Jason's name. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Then a click. He didn't say hello. He just breathed, like he already knew. "You saw it, didn't you?" I swallowed, gripping the sink tighter. "What the fuck is wrong with my son?" Silence. Then Jason said something that made my blood turn to ice. "He's not your son." The words slammed into my chest like a sledgehammer. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Jason exhaled shakily. Listen to me, and listen carefully, he whispered. You need to act normal. You need to pretend everything's fine. My stomach twisted. What are you talking about? My voice was barely more than a breath. Jason hesitated. Then, in a voice so quiet, I almost didn't hear it, he said, They know when you know. I felt the world tilt beneath me. I turned, glancing at the bathroom door like I expected Noah, or whatever that thing was, to be standing right outside. Jason kept talking, his voice urgent. They blend in, they copy us, but they're not like us. And the second you realize it, the second you start acting different, they know, and they don't let you go. I felt sick. My stomach churned. My head spun. Number. No, this was insane. This was impossible. Jason kept talking, but I barely heard him over the blood pounding in my ears. They take people, man. They replace them. Nobody knows how many of them are out there. Could be thousands. Could be millions. I shook my head. That's bullshit. Then delete the app. I froze. Jason's voice was sharp now. Cold. Go ahead. Delete it. Pretend none of this ever happened. Go back to your normal life. I looked down at my phone. The black icon sat there on my home screen. Innocent. Waiting. I reached for it, but I couldn't. Because I knew. Deep down, I knew. Jason sighed. I'm sorry, man. Then he hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in bed, staring at the door, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Nothing did. By the time the sun started creeping through the blinds, I had convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe I just needed to clear my head. Then I heard the baby monitor crackle again, soft breathing, and then, Daddy? The voice was wrong, not in the way it had been last night. This time, it sounded closer, like he wasn't in his crib anymore, like he was right outside my door. I reached for my phone with trembling hands, opened the camera, switched to the app. I turned it toward the bedroom door, and the second the screen lit up, my heart stopped, because the door was open, and standing in the doorway was Noah, or at least the thing that looked like Noah. But it wasn't just Noah anymore. The tendrils were longer now, thicker. They twisted and coiled around his body, stretching out into the hallway, curling along the walls. And his face. God, his face. It was still smiling. Only now, his mouth was open. And inside, there were more teeth. Rows and rows of them, going too far back, stretching into a darkness that wasn't human. That wasn't anything I could understand. Then, without moving his lips, without making a single sound, his voice came through the baby monitor. Daddy, I don't think Mommy's awake anymore. My body wouldn't move. My mind was screaming at me to run, to do something, to get the fuck out of that bed. But all I could do was stare at the thing in the doorway, at Noah, at the thing pretending to be Noah. The tendrils curling and twisting from his body were longer now, stretching across the ceiling like spider legs. His mouth, his too wide, too full of teeth mouth, was still open, but he wasn't speaking with it. Number. His voice was still coming from the fucking baby monitor. Daddy, I don't think Mommy's awake anymore. A cold, gut-wrenching dread spread through me. I turned my head, slowly, afraid of what I was about to see. Emma was lying beside me, motionless. Her chest didn't rise, didn't fall. I reached out with a trembling hand. Emma? My voice cracked. She didn't move. I touched her shoulder, and her body collapsed inward, like a fucking empty skin suit. There was nothing inside. No bones, no muscle, no organs, just hollow skin, folding in on itself like a discarded Halloween costume. And then it started to move. My breath caught in my throat as Emma's empty fucking body began to twist and writhe, like something inside of it was trying to push its way out. I screamed. I launched myself off the bed, scrambling backwards so fast I nearly tripped over myself. The skin, her skin, was peeling apart, splitting at the seams. Long black fingers curled out from her throat, stretching, pushing, clawing their way out. And then, a face. Not hers. Something else. Something that had been wearing her. The skin of Emma's mouth ripped apart as something else crawled through it. A wide, grinning, impossibly stretched face shoved its way out of her, peeling her jaw open like a fucking mask. I lost my mind. I bolted, ran for the door. Noah, the thing in Noah's shape, tilted its head as I stumbled past him. I could feel the air around him change, the temperature dropping, the smell, rotting meat, and something worse, burning my nostrils as I crashed into the hallway. I didn't stop, didn't look back. I barreled down the stairs, barely keeping myself upright. My breath was coming in ragged gasps, my vision blurred with panic. I needed to get the fuck out. I needed to get in my car and drive. But as I reached the front door, I saw something that made my knees buckle. The door was already open, and standing just outside, filling the street, filling the fucking world, were dozens of them. Hundreds. They were just standing there, lining the sidewalk, filling the yard, their bodies still, their heads tilted too far, their hollow eyes locked on me. And behind them, further back, in the distance, where the city should have been, I saw something that wasn't a city anymore. The streets were wrong. Buildings had melted into shapes that didn't make sense. The sky was too low. The sun, Jesus Christ, the fucking sun, was cracked open, like something had ripped into it and left its burning guts spilling out. This wasn't my world. It wasn't my street. It wasn't even reality anymore. And then, as I stood there, paralyzed, the Noah thing spoke again. Not from the baby monitor this time. From everywhere. From the sky, from the streets, from inside my fucking head. Daddy, why are you running? And that was when the smiling people outside started to move. The world outside was rotten. It wasn't just the sky, or the sun, or the way the buildings twisted and sagged like they were melting into something not meant for human eyes. It was them, the smiling people. They weren't just standing there anymore. They were moving, not walking, not running, just shifting, like their bodies were rearranging themselves in ways they shouldn't be able to. 1 second, they were standing in my yard. The next, they were closer. Too close. Their heads lolled at unnatural angles, their necks snapping like dry twigs, their grins splitting their faces in half. They didn't blink. They didn't breathe. They just smiled. And then, they started whispering. It was one voice. All of them, speaking in perfect, sickening unison. You shouldn't have looked. My stomach turned inside out. I staggered back from the door, my brain screaming at me to move, to run, to do something. But I couldn't, because the whispering wasn't just coming from outside anymore. It was behind me too. You shouldn't have looked. I spun around. Noah, or the thing wearing Noah's skin, was standing at the bottom of the stairs. The tendrils spilling out of his body had grown thicker. They were crawling along the walls now, curling around the picture frames, snaking toward me like they could taste my fear. And his his tiny, innocent face. It wasn't just smiling anymore. It was cracking, like something was pushing its way out from inside. Something that wasn't a child. I took a step back. My heel caught the edge of the carpet. I stumbled, and then Noah opened his mouth, and the screaming started, not from him, from inside him. A noise that wasn't human, that wasn't from this world. A shrieking guttural wail, like the sound of thousands of mouths tearing open at once. It hit me like a train. The walls shook, the windows shattered, the air collapsed in on itself, like the whole house was being ripped out of existence. And outside, the smiling people started laughing. A deep, wet, choking sound, like they were drowning in their own voices. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just ran. Through the kitchen, out the back door, into a world that wasn't my world anymore. The streets were wrong. The houses were wrong. Everything looked almost normal. But when I looked closer, I could see the differences. The trees were breathing. The sidewalks were shifting under my feet, like I was walking on something alive. And the sky, God, the sky, it wasn't blue anymore. It was a color I don't have a name for, a color that shouldn't exist. And it was watching me. I could feel it. Something in that sky was looking down, and it knew me. I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to have seen this. I kept running. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. But no matter how far I ran, the whispering followed me. You shouldn't have looked. You shouldn't have looked. You shouldn't have looked. I don't remember how I made it out. I don't remember leaving that place. 1 second, I was running through the impossible streets, and the next, I was waking up in my car, on the side of the highway. My phone was in my lap. The app was gone. No icon, no trace. Like it had never been there at all. For a second, I thought I had imagined it. Maybe it was a nightmare, a breakdown. But then I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, and I saw it. The faintest hint of black tendrils, curling at the edges of my skin, moving beneath the surface, like something had followed me back, like something was inside me now. And then I smiled. Not because I wanted to, not because I meant to, but because something else was smiling through me. I'm not alone anymore. I don't mean that in some existential way. I mean it literally. There's something inside me now, something crawling under my skin. It whispers when I try to sleep. It smiles when I look in the mirror. And I don't think I'm in control anymore. I spent the first few hours after waking up in my car frozen, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that I had imagined it, that I had dreamed the whole thing. But then I saw my reflection, and I saw the tendrils slithering just beneath my skin, moving, breathing, like something inside me was stretching its limbs. I gasped, twisting in my seat, trying to shake it off, trying to feel normal again. But it was in me now. No, not in me. I was E.T. now. I shoved open the door and stumbled onto the side of the highway, gasping for air. Everything was too loud. The roar of passing cars, the hum of streetlights, the wind against my skin. It was all wrong. Like I wasn't really here anymore. Like I was somewhere between worlds. And the worst part, it felt good. The thing inside me, it was awake now. And it was hungry. I made it home just before dawn. I don't even remember driving. 1 second, I was on the highway, and the next, I was standing in my driveway, staring at my front door like I had never seen it before. The house was silent, dark, like something had emptied it out from the inside. I swallowed hard. I didn't want to go in. I knew what was waiting for me inside, but my feet moved anyway. The thing inside me wanted to go back. I stepped inside. The air was thick, still, like the house itself was holding its breath. The living room was the same. The kitchen was the same, but I could feel it. The wrongness, like I was standing in a replica of my home, but not the real thing. I forced myself up the stairs, one step at a time. I already knew where I was going. Noah's room. I pushed the door open, and there he was, sitting in the crib, waiting. He wasn't smiling anymore. He wasn't moving. But his eyes, God, his eyes, they were black now. Not like pupils, not like shadows, just black, like looking into the void of universe that should never have existed. He blinked once, slowly, and then, in a voice that wasn't a voice, in a sound that wasn't made for human ears, he said, "You brought it back with you." I couldn't breathe. "It's in you now." I staggered back, gripping the door frame like I was about to collapse. Because he was right. I could feel it inside me, pressing against my ribs, curling up my spine. It was watching through my eyes now. I could feel it smiling through me. And then Noah did something that made my entire body go cold. He reached out, not for me, for something behind me. I turned, and there was Emma, or what was left of her. She was standing in the hallway, her body stretched and wrong, her skin hanging loose, like an empty puppet waiting to be filled. And she was smiling. Not smiling, grinning, a mouth full of teeth that weren't human anymore. And she whispered, with my voice, "You shouldn't have looked. I don't know how I got out. I don't know where I ran to. All I know is that I kept running through the night, through a world that wasn't mine anymore. And when I finally stopped, when my body gave out, I realized something horrible. I wasn't running away from them. I was running away from myself. Because the thing inside me, it was still smiling, and it was never going to leave. I don't have much time. I can feel it taking over now. My thoughts aren't mine anymore. My hands don't belong to me. And soon, I won't be me at all. If you find this, if you're reading this, don't look for me. Don't download the app. Don't try to see what's really out there. Because once you do, they see you too. And once they see you, they never stop smiling. I used to work as a dark web Santa, but one man's Christmas list made me quit. I know how this sounds. Like some twisted urban legend you'd find buried in the depths of r/NOSLEEP. Something you'd read at 3 a.m. and forget about by morning. I wish I could believe that. I wish I could tell myself that this was just some elaborate creepypasta, a sick fantasy cooked up by some internet weirdo looking for cheap thrills. But I can't, because I lived it. And if you're smart, you'll never, ever make the same mistake I did. It started last December, a couple of weeks before Christmas. I was flat broke. I mean, ramen for breakfast, lunch, and dinner broke. Rent was overdue. My car was one bad pothole away from breaking down completely, and my bank account had more overdraft fees than actual money. I was desperate. So I did what any desperate, half-brain-dead millennial would do. I scoured the internet for any way to make a quick buck. Most of the stuff I found was useless. Surveys that paid 5 cents per hour. Sketchy pyramid schemes. The usual garbage. But then, I stumbled onto something different. I was on a deep web job board. I know, stupid. But at that point, I didn't care. I just needed something, and that's when I saw the ad. Wanted, online Santa, easy work, big pay, or it sounded ridiculous. The post was short, almost like whoever wrote it didn't want to leave a trace. It just said, looking for someone to play Santa online. No experience needed. Just read Christmas lists on video. Big payouts. Serious inquiries only. Attached was an anonymous email. I hesitated. The whole thing felt off. But $500 per video. I'd be an idiot to pass that up. So, like the idiot I was, I sent an email. Not even 10 minutes later, I got a response. The application process. The reply was simple. No greeting, no signature, just instructions. Record yourself reading this script. Ho ho ho, Merry Christmas. Attach the video to this email. Await further instructions. That was it. No contract, no interview, nothing. At this point, any normal person would have seen the red flags, but I was broke and desperate. So, I did it. I sat at my desk, turned on my webcam, and forced out the jolliest ho 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 I could manage. Then, I hit send. Exactly 6 minutes later, my phone buzzed. New email. I opened it, expecting a rejection, or at best, some weird follow-up. Instead, I saw one sentence that made my heart pound. You're hired. And below that, a PayPal notification. $1,000 deposited instantly. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. This had to be a scam, a prank, something. Nobody pays that kind of money for something this stupid. But the money was real. It was in my account, spendable. And that's when I ignored the voice in my head screaming at me to stop. The first lists, the first few requests were harmless. I'd get an email with a text file attached, listing out gifts. I'd record myself reading them, send the video back, and within minutes, I'd get paid. At first, the lists were normal. A Barbie dream house, an iPad, a stuffed bunny, new Jordans, PS5, iPhone 14, a diamond necklace, a trip to Paris, a Rolex. Sure, some were weird. One guy wanted me to say his name 3 times in a row while blinking exactly twice. But I figured, hey, people have their kinks. As long as I got paid, I didn't care. And for a while, it was easy money. Then, I got the list. The one that made my blood turn to ice. The True Believer. The email came at 3:33 a.m. The subject line was blank. The sender's name was just The True Believer. I clicked on the attachment. It was a simple text file, just like all the others. But the moment I opened it, my stomach twisted. The list read, a lock of blonde hair, a child-sized winter coat, red, a pair of blue sneakers, size 3, a home video from Christmas morning, a missing poster. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering in my ears. What the fuck? I reread it, hoping I had misinterpreted something. But no, there was no mistaking it. This wasn't some joke. This wasn't a kid's wish list. This was a psychopath's shopping list. And worse, I was the one reading it out loud. I wanted to ignore it, block the sender, walk away. But then, my phone buzzed. New PayPal notification. $5,000 deposited instantly. My breath caught in my throat. $5,000 for one video. I told myself it was fake, that it had to be some weird performance art thing, some rich sicko getting off on creepy shit, that if I just did the video, I'd get paid, and I could forget all about it. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I set up my camera, took a deep breath, and pressed record, and with a forced, jolly voice, I read the list out loud. When I was done, I sent it off. Exactly 6 minutes later, I got a reply. A video file. The thumbnail made my stomach drop. It was a dimly lit room, a table, something small sitting in the center. I almost didn't click it, but my curiosity got the best of me. I pressed play. The camera panned across the table. Sitting in the center was a lock of blonde hair, neatly tied with a red ribbon. Next to it, a small red winter coat, perfectly folded. A pair of blue sneakers, size 3. Then, the camera zoomed in on the last item, a missing poster. The name on it was Emily Carter, age 7. I recognized her. She had been on the news. A little girl, vanished from her front yard. The camera kept rolling. A moment later, a man's voice, low, raspy, filled with something I can only describe as pure evil, spoke. "Thank you, Santa." Then the screen went black. My hands were shaking. I wanted to believe it was fake, that this was all some elaborate hoax. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't a game. I had just spoken a list of real things, things that belonged to a real missing child. And now, he had thanked me. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Then, another email. I almost didn't open it, but when I did, I saw 6 words that made my blood run cold. "Next list coming soon, Santa." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my dark apartment, staring at my laptop like it was cursed. My breath felt too loud in the silence. My fingers twitched against my knees, tapping out a nervous rhythm, over and over again. I wanted to believe that what I had seen was some kind of sick joke, some elaborate prank designed to fuck with me. But the money was real. The PayPal notification still sat in my inbox. $5,000, transferred, spendable, like some blood-stained hush money sitting there, waiting to be used. And the video, that fucking video, the red coat, the blue sneakers, the missing poster, the way he had said, "Thank you, Santa," like I had helped him, like I was part of it. I wanted to throw my laptop out the window, smash it, burn it, but none of that would erase what I had done. None of it would change the fact that I had spoken those words into a microphone, read that list with my own voice, sold my soul for $5,000 and a fucking Christmas costume. I should have gone to the police, should have called someone, but I didn't, because I knew, deep in the rotting pit of my gut, that it wouldn't make a difference. I had no names, no locations, no proof that the video was real, beyond the twisted feeling in my chest that told me it was. And more than that, I was scared. Scared of who this man was. Scared of what he might do if he knew I had reported him. And most of all, scared that I had already become part of whatever he was doing. Because the second I read that list, I was involved. The next list arrives. The email came the next night, 3:33 a.m. again. Same blank subject line, same sender. I already knew what it was before I even opened it. Another text file, another fucking list. With trembling hands, I clicked. 1. A train ticket, one way. 2. A child's backpack, blue, worn. 3. A single glove, pink, size small. 4. A VHS tape labeled December 17th, 1998, 5. A Polaroid picture. I felt sick. I could already see it. The items laid out neatly on some cold metal table, waiting for me to acknowledge them. The train ticket. Where had it come from? Who had used it? Was it a way to lure someone? A piece of evidence from something that had already happened. And the glove. My mind went places I didn't want it to go. There was something worse about it this time. Something heavier. The first list had been terrifying, sure, but it had felt like trophies, a collection, a twisted display of possession. But this felt recent, The VHS tape was the worst part. I could already picture it. Grainy footage, flickering shadows, muffled screams buried under the whirring sound of an old camcorder. Something about the date, December 17th, 1998, felt deliberate, chosen. And the last item, a Polaroid picture. No description, no explanation. Just that. I wanted to run. I wanted to smash my laptop and pretend none of this had ever happened. But then, another PayPal notification. $10,000. My throat closed. I stared at the numbers on the screen, my hands shaking. $10,000. I could leave. Right now. Pay off my rent. Get a plane ticket. Start over somewhere far, far away. Or I could do the job. Read the list. Send the video. And maybe, just maybe, figure out what the fuck was going on. Maybe even stop it. That's what I told myself. Anyway, that's the lie I whispered into the hollow spaces of my chest as I pressed record. The mistake that changed. Everything I spoke, the words. I read the list. And when I was done, I sent it off. Exactly 6 minutes later, the reply came. Another video. I almost didn't click it. My stomach was already in knots, my body screaming at me to shut the laptop and throw it in the ocean. But I did. The screen flickered to life. A dimly lit room. A table. Same setup as before. Only this time, the items were already there. The train ticket, yellowed and creased at the edges. The small blue backpack, a zipper half open, something dark and smudged on the fabric. A single pink glove, crumpled and wet. My breathing went shallow. The VHS tape sat next to it, the label peeling at the corners. And then, the Polaroid. It was face down. The man's hand entered the frame. Slowly, deliberately, he picked up the photo, flipped it over, and I stopped breathing, because the image staring back at me was me. Me, sitting at my desk. Me, recording the video. Me, reading the fucking list. The shot was grainy, but unmistakable. Same hoodie, same laptop, same shitty apartment lighting. The timestamp in the corner said 3:33 a.m., the exact time the email had arrived. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. My skin went cold, my hands numb against the keyboard. How? I hadn't heard anything. I hadn't seen anyone. My doors were locked. My windows were shut. I was alone. But I wasn't, because someone had been there. Someone had stood in the darkness, watching me, photographing me, leaving the image behind, knowing I would see it. And then, the man's voice, low, raspy, smiling. "You're part of it now, Santa." The screen went black. My stomach twisted. Then, another email. I forced myself to click. Only 2 words this time. Next list? My mouth was dry. I tried to breathe, tried to think, tried to do anything other than stare at the screen in horror. But my body was frozen, because I already knew. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was never a fucking job. And whatever came next, it was meant for me. The Polaroid sat frozen on my screen. My face, my desk, my shitty apartment, captured from somewhere inside my own home. I wanted to move. I wanted to rip my laptop's battery out, grab my car keys, and get the hell out of there. But I couldn't. I sat there, body locked in place, breath shallow. My eyes burned from staring too long. My chest was tight, my heartbeat pounding like a warning. Leave, leave, leave. But it was too late. I was already part of it. Another email. I forced myself to look. 2 words. Next list? Like I had a choice. The list that changed everything. The attachment was waiting for me, as if it knew I'd open it, as if it knew I had to. I clicked. The text file loaded, and this time I stopped breathing entirely. 1. A black hoodie, frayed cuffs, cigarette burn on left sleeve. 2. A cracked iPhone 11, lock screen, 3 missed calls, 1 voicemail. 3. A car key, Honda, worn edges. 4. A recording, labeled December 21st, 3:33 a.m. 5. A body bag, number, no. My chair scraped against the floor as I pushed back from my desk, my vision going blurry at the edges. My stomach clenched so hard I thought I might throw up. The hoodie. My hoodie. The one I was wearing right now. The cigarette burn on the sleeve. A stupid accident from months ago, when my friend had dropped his lighter on me outside a 7-Eleven. Something no one else would know about. The cracked iPhone. Mine. The 3 missed calls. I grabbed my actual phone, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Pressed the power button. The screen lit up. 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail. I felt something ice cold spread through my chest. My fingers trembled as I tapped the voicemail. The robotic voice spoke first. New message. Received today, 3:33 a.m. That time again. That fucking time. Then the message played. At first there was nothing, just static. Then a breath, slow, deep, like someone inhaling right against my ear. Then a voice, low, raspy, smiling. Found you. I threw my phone. It hit the floor with a dull thud, skidding under my couch. My hands clamped over my mouth, trying to keep the scream inside. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real, but it was. The list, my hoodie, my phone, the lost item, a body bag, and I already knew who it was meant for. The recording, another email, this time just a video file. The title made my skin crawl. December 21st, 3:33 a.m. I didn't want to open it. I couldn't open it. But my body moved on its own, some part of me needing to see, needing to know. The video started in complete darkness, shuffling sounds, a soft scraping noise, like something being dragged across the floor. Then, a dim light flickered on, and I almost bit through my own tongue. It was my apartment, my living room, my couch, my coffee table. Someone was recording from the hallway, just outside my bedroom door. Someone had been inside my home. The camera moved, slow, steady. It crept forward, toward my bedroom, toward me. The door was slightly open. Through the crack, I could see a shape. Mr. Sleep, completely unaware. My body, my face, slack and vulnerable in the dim glow of my laptop screen. The camera pushed closer. A gloved hand reached out, gently brushing my shoulder. I didn't move, didn't wake up. I could hear my own breathing in the video. Deep, peaceful, completely fucking oblivious to the fact that someone was standing over me, touching me, recording me. The gloved hand retreated, a soft chuckle. That same voice. So easy. The screen cut to black. I slammed my laptop shut, shoving myself away from the desk, so fast my chair toppled over. My breaths came in ragged, gasping bursts. My vision swam. I wanted to convince myself it was fake, but I couldn't, because the proof was already in my apartment. The voicemail, the missed calls, the feeling deep in my bones that I wasn't alone. I hadn't been alone for a long, long time. No escape. I ran. I grabbed my car keys, bolted for the door, yanked it open, and stopped cold. Sitting there, neatly placed on my doormat, was a small wrapped present. Red paper, white ribbon, a tag. From Santa. I stared at it. My breath came too fast, my body screaming at me to run, run, run. But I couldn't move. I could only reach out, hands trembling, and untie the ribbon. The paper fell away. Inside was a Polaroid. I already knew what it would be before I even looked. But when I did, my knees buckled. It was me, taken seconds ago, standing in my doorway, looking down at the present, a perfect frozen snapshot of this exact moment. I looked up, my eyes darting wildly across the darkened street. Nothing. No footsteps, no sound, no movement. But I knew. Someone was watching. Someone was out there, waiting. And they had just let me know in the most brutal way possible. I wasn't getting away. Not now. Not ever. The Polaroid slipped from my fingers, fluttering onto the doorstep. It wasn't possible. It wasn't fucking possible. But the picture didn't lie. It was me, standing right here, looking down at this exact gift, taken seconds ago, which meant someone had been watching, not from a distance, not from some hidden camera in my apartment, but up close, standing somewhere in the darkness, just beyond the glow of the streetlights, close enough to see me, close enough to capture this moment. My skin prickled, my heart slammed against my ribs. I spun around, scanning the street, the parking lot, the rows of identical apartment doors. Nothing, no footsteps, no movement, but I knew they were still there. I could feel it, the weight of unseen eyes pressing against my skin, the overwhelming presence of something waiting just beyond my sight, watching, waiting. And then my phone vibrated, a single notification, new email from the True Believer. I didn't want to open it. I already knew what it would say, but I had to. My hand shook as I tapped the screen. The message was short, no subject line, no greeting, just 3 words. Do you understand? A cold, empty feeling spread through my chest. They weren't asking if I understood what was happening. They were asking if I understood who I belonged to now. The apartment was no longer mine. I stumbled back inside, locking the door, my breath coming too fast. My mind raced, grasping for any rational explanation, any way to convince myself that this wasn't real. Maybe it was all just some elaborate prank. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe. And then I saw it. My laptop screen. It was on. I hadn't left it on. The lid was still closed. But somehow, impossibly, the screen was glowing beneath it. A faint, eerie light spilling onto the desk. A new window was open. A video file. My body moved on its own, drawn forward by some awful, crawling sense of inevitability. I reached out, slowly, flipped the lid open, and pressed play. The footage was grainy, black and white, a security camera feed. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The angle was wide, showing an empty room, bare floors, blank walls. A single chair sat in the center, facing away from the camera. The room felt off. Something about it made my stomach twist. The way the walls were too smooth, too clean. The way the lighting was dim and artificial, like a basement or a windowless back room. Then, movement. A man stepped into the frame. My heart stopped, because I knew exactly who he was. I had never seen his face before, but I didn't have to. I recognized him instantly. The True Believer, the one who had been sending me the lists, the one who had left the present on my doorstep. He was tall, gaunt, dressed in all black. His skin was pale, almost sickly, stretched too tight over his sharp cheekbones. His eyes, God, his eyes were dark and sunken, gleaming with something I couldn't name. He moved slowly, deliberately, like he knew I was watching, like he wanted me to see. He walked to the chair, paused, and then he turned it around. My stomach dropped, because there was someone sitting in it, a person, tied to the chair with thick, coarse rope, their head slumped forward, their hair matted with sweat and something darker. Blood. Their arms were behind their back, wrists bound so tightly, the skin looked bruised, discolored. Their chest rose and fell in shallow, shuddering breaths. They were alive. Barely. The true believer tilted his head, watching them. Then, slowly, he reached out and grabbed a handful of their hair. With a sharp yank, he pulled their head up, and I saw their face. The world tilted, my vision blurred, my knees buckled, because I was looking at myself. The person in the chair was me. It wasn't just a resemblance. It wasn't just someone who looked vaguely similar. It was me. My face, my clothes, my split lip, the one I'd gotten 3 days ago after biting it in my sleep, the scratch on my cheek, the one from when I had absent-mindedly scraped myself with a broken nail. This wasn't a twin. This wasn't some deep fake bullshit. This was me, sitting in that chair, bound, beaten, bleeding. The true believer let out a low chuckle. He crouched beside my bound, shaking form, ran a single, gloved finger down my cheek. "Santa," he murmured. Then, he looked straight into the camera, straight at me, straight through me, and he smiled, like he knew something I didn't, like he was enjoying a joke I wasn't in on yet. My body felt frozen, locked in place by something deeper than fear. My mind screamed at me to move, to look away, to do something, but I couldn't. I could only watch as he stood up, stepped back, and pulled something from his pocket. A knife. Long, serrated. It gleamed under the dim light, sharp and hungry. My bound self whimpered. The true believer tilted his head, considering. Then, without hesitation, he drove the knife into my chest. The screen glitched, flashed static, flickered back. Blood. So much blood, pouring from my mouth, my chest. The chair beneath me drenched in dark, seeping red. I let out a strangled sound, stumbling back, knocking over my chair. My lungs burned, my pulse a frantic drumbeat in my skull. Number. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But the video kept playing, and the last thing I saw was myself, dying, eyes rolling back, mouth slack, body going limp, slumping against the ropes. Then, blackness. The video ended. I was already dead. I sat there shaking, gasping, staring at the blank screen. And then, another email. No text. Just an attachment. A single image. I didn't want to open it. I already knew what it would be. But my hands moved anyway, trembling as I tapped the file. The picture loaded. A body bag, sealed shut, tagged with a single name. Mine. I clamped a hand over my mouth, barely stopping the scream clawing its way up my throat. Then, the final email. 4 words. "Merry Christmas, Santa." My vision blurred. My heart slammed against my ribs, because I finally understood. This wasn't just a threat. It wasn't just some sick warning. I was already dead, and whatever was coming next, there was no way out. The image of the body bag was still burned into my retinas. My name, my full name, was printed on the tag, stamped in cold, clinical ink. I couldn't move, couldn't think. My lungs felt tight, like the air had thickened around me, like something was pressing against my chest with invisible hands. I had done everything wrong. I had ignored the warnings. I had read the lists. I had let my curiosity push me deeper and deeper, let my greed cloud my fucking judgment. And now, it didn't matter what I did next, because according to them, I was already dead. A knock at the door. A sharp, deliberate knock cut through the silence. My breath hitched. I stared at the door. Number. No. I was alone. I hadn't heard anyone walk up. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. There was no elevator, no way for someone to sneak up without me hearing the creak of the stairs, the shuffle of footsteps. But now, there was a knock. 3 short, patient taps, like whoever was on the other side already knew I was there, already knew I wasn't going to answer. They were waiting. Another knock, slower this time, more deliberate. My whole body locked up. My fingers twitched toward my phone. 911. I needed to call 911 right now. But before I could dial, my phone buzzed. Another email. I didn't want to look. I did not want to look. But my body moved on its own, shaking fingers, swiping the screen. The message was short. Don't keep me waiting, Santa. And attached, a live feed, a camera feed, grainy and flickering. It was showing my front door. From the other side, a shadow stood there, just beyond the peephole. Tall, still, waiting. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a hollow, muffled sound, but I barely heard it. My ears were ringing. My blood felt thick and wrong inside my veins. I was trapped, and I had been since the moment I opened that first fucking email. The final list. I didn't go to the door. I didn't answer. I just stood there, frozen, waiting for something, anything, to happen. And then, another email. The final email. I knew it before I even read it. The subject line was different this time. It wasn't blank. It said, "Your last Christmas list." My hand shook as I opened the attachment. A text file. The list. Only 5 items. 1. A wooden chair, worn, missing a leg. 2. A length of rope, 6 feet. 3. A handwritten note, final words. 4. A cold apartment, vacant, untouched. 5. An obituary, published December 25th, 2023. I couldn't breathe. I felt like something inside me had cracked, like a chasm had split open inside my skull and swallowed all rational thought. This wasn't a random list. This wasn't another collection of trophies. This was a crime scene. My crime scene. I saw it in my head like a flash of something that hadn't happened yet, like a memory bleeding in from the future. The chair tipped over. The missing leg snapped under my weight. The rope looped around my neck, swinging slightly in the cold air. The note, written in my own fucking handwriting, telling the world it had all been my choice. The apartment, silent, unlocked, left behind like a ghost town, with no signs of struggle, no forced entry, and the obituary, written like I had done this to myself, like I had been depressed, like I had been struggling, like there had been nothing suspicious about it at all. No one would look deeper, no one would ask questions, because they had set it up perfectly, because according to the world, I had never been murdered. I had simply given up. I staggered back, slamming against the wall. My breath came in ragged, frantic gasps, my heart threatening to shatter. This was worse than death. They weren't just going to kill me. They were going to erase me, make me disappear. The realization, the knocking had stopped. The apartment was silent again, and that scared me more, because whoever was outside, they weren't leaving. They were already inside. I felt it, the unnatural stillness, the almost suffocating weight of someone standing just out of sight, waiting for me to see them. I turned slowly, and there, in the darkened reflection of my TV screen, a shape, tall, motionless, standing directly behind me, watching. I didn't scream. I couldn't, because the second I saw him, the second my mind registered what was happening, a hand clamped over my mouth, and everything went black. Epilogue, the last Christmas gift. I don't know how much time passed. When I woke up, I was somewhere else. A cold, dark room, concrete walls, no windows, a single dim light overhead, humming softly like a dying insect. and in front of me, a chair, a wooden chair, worn, missing a leg. Next to it, neatly coiled on the floor, a length of rope. I wasn't tied up. I wasn't restrained. I could move, but I didn't, because something sat in my lap. A small, wrapped present. Red paper, white ribbon, a tag. I knew what it would say before I even touched it, but my fingers moved anyway, trembling, numb, not my own. I pulled the ribbon. The paper fell away. Inside, a single Polaroid. I stared at it. My breath hitched, because the photo, it was my apartment. Dark, empty. The front door was open, just slightly. A cold, silent invitation, and at the bottom, scrawled in uneven black ink, "Come home, Santa." Final email. Somewhere in the distance, a phone buzzed. A new email. The subject line, "Merry Christmas." And the message, "See you next year."